Hi, folks. Welcome to Inclusive Collective, where we talk about stories of inclusive people and innovation. I am Nadia Butt, and I'm joined with my co-star, Rob Hadley, today.
Oh,
Hey, Rob, what is good?
hello, Nadia. Everything's good.
What's good?
Everything's fantastic. How are you
Yeah,
today?
doing good. I'm doing good. Rob, what was your first job,
Ah,
like ever?
I, so my first job was my mom worked at the Division of Wildlife in Colorado. And
Okay.
so I had this job responding to mail from people that were trying to get hunters licenses and for some reason had some sort of a problem. So I had a desk job. I had a desk job when I was like
Oh my
15.
gosh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I love that. What do you think were some like meaningful things that you took away or that you were taught or just in general, like what did you take away from that job?
I remember very vividly getting letters from people that say that their husband or father had applied for a hunting license and someone was writing into me to tell me that they had passed away. And so I think learning to respond to those things with empathy and
Oh wow.
and trying to do a good job for that particular person and just thinking about business as being there's always a person on the other side of that transaction. So I think that was
Sure.
very meaningful first experience for me.
Love that. Thank you for sharing.
Your first job, Nadia? What do we got?
Oh gosh. Well, the reason I asked you this question is because I'm up in Toronto visiting family and my cousin's son has a job at Tim Hortons. He's like 16.
Awesome.
And I was like, so my first job was Dunkin' Donuts,
Oh,
and
oh.
I was sharing with my cousin's kid that, like, what I learned are skills that I feel like transferred to my adult life, which is, like, exactly what you said, like, engaging with a customer, like, understanding customer experience, understanding, like, how to handle money, like, there were so many life lessons that you learned at that age when you do things like retail or even, like, your desk job,
Everyone,
right?
every
So
person should have to be in some sort of service job as almost like a national service program to help people empathize,
yeah,
right? So, uh,
totally.
yeah. Nadia, well, let's. I think it's time to get to some of the news stories and news items that we're following this week. The first thing we got to talk about, I think it's unavoidable. I think we have to talk about a big trend in workplace news, quiet quitting. I think we just have to talk about it. According to Gallup, only one-third of US workers describe themselves as engaged, which is a sharp drop, apparently, from 2020.
Mm.
And the,
Okay.
the focus on disengaged workers became something of a sensation this summer. As you know, when Gen Z workers filmed themselves and posted themselves on TikTok doing the absolute minimum to get by. So
Okay.
Nadia, do you have any thoughts on quiet quitting? Just because we have to talk about it.
Do I have thoughts? Yes, like, this is definitely showing up more and more, especially I know you're not on social media as much, but, like, I am, and I've definitely seen it on, like, Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok, yeah, when I'm, like, scrolling through, and I'm so curious about it because it is this new phenomenon. I was reading this HuffPost article about lifestyle fatigue, and it mentioned how people are just tired from everything, right? Like pandemic. We think about like the last 3 years. There's pandemic, vaccine, expectations from work, the demands from work, social issues, the election. I mean, sometimes we forget that, like in the U.S., we had this like really contentious election a few years ago. Climate change, family, friendships, kids. I mean, all of these things that life has, right?
Hmm.
I feel like the last few years have been just so bizarre, and a lot of that I know we're not psychologists, but, like, if we were to do armchair psychology, I feel like in many ways we've all experienced some form of trauma, and for me personally, part of that is, like, you spend so many hours at work and you do give yourself to the company, you're so loyal to a company. Is that actually what life is about? I don't know. And I think people are starting to question that, right? Like, I've even heard this term quiet firing. Have you heard this?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I've been quiet fired as well, said before too.
Right, it's I mean, it's and then for our listeners who don't know what quiet firing is, it's basically when, like, leaders penalize their employees or ignore their employees to the point where they basically end up just leaving. It's, like, wild to me, like, it's creating this unhealthy atmosphere. I know you have a lot to say about it too, so I'll pause. What are your thoughts
No,
on it?
I think that I don't know if it necessarily is a new thing, right? And so, since the dawn of humankind, people have managed their labor, right? And based on the conditions that are presented to them, what's happening in their life, whether they like their job or not. And so, I think that the only real innovation here from Gen Z is actually just recording themselves and posting videos of themselves not working hard, which people have done for a
Oh,
really long
interesting, yeah.
period of time. So I think,
Sure.
but I think the finger in the eye aspect of it, of just saying, look, I'm doing the absolute minimum, is the interesting thing. But like, so I feel like the labor markets are really, they're complex adaptive systems, meaning that people are not, that if they're not engaged in their job, they may still stay. People that are super engaged, they may leave for different reasons. We all have different
Sure.
reasons for the way that we show up at work, the effort that we put in, how much effort we can expend based on what's happening outside of work. What we talk about on the show all the time is what we're advocating for is if employers create an inclusive environment, a place where people feel like they belong, if they want to show up and do their best, then they'll be fine, and it's not necessarily going to be an issue. I think we always used to talk about this, right? Like people don't
Mhm.
come to work or take jobs and show up with the intent of not doing a great job, right? Like they show up every
Right.
day. They're not, hey, I'm going to show up. I'm going to do a terrible job. What happens is that is taken away from them, either bad manager, bad role, bad company. And I think that, people
Unclear
respond.
expectations,
Exactly.
overburdened. Yeah,
People respond
totally.
accordingly to those conditions.
Right. I That's great. I love that.
I do.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
am. I am feeling really bad for. I have this picture of a person in my mind. His name's Bruce, and he's in like the accounting department, and he's 55, and he retired quietly many years ago, and I was just
Yeah.
I just need to make it to the finish line, and now people are starting to ask him, hey, do you think Bruce is quiet quitting here? And he's just like, I'm trying to just
Oh,
get through. Yeah, so I
interesting.
feel bad for that person.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I also I well, yes, and I also feel bad for, like, the 23 or 24-year-old who just entered the workforce, and I understand that, like, there are bad managers out there that really focus not necessarily on a lot of empathy or just understanding that the world has shifted in the last 3 years, and
Right.
I think having an understanding, empathetic, a leader who has these humanistic qualities, who's also very clear about the role and the work where folks don't feel overburdened. I think that's also real. Like I don't yeah, I think it is that 55-year-old, but I also think it's like the 23-year-old who just got out of college and is sort of just like, what the heck did I enter? Like this is wildly crazy. But on the other side, I feel like there probably is also employees that maybe are just kinda coasting. I don't know, what do you think? Do you think there are people that are just coasting and, like,
Right.
yeah,
Of
getting paid
course. That's
and
always happened,
yeah,
right? And
of
we're
course.
a very
It's nothing
dynamic
new.
country with a dynamic economic system. People can leave whenever they want, and you can be held accountable as well. So I just don't think that there's anything incredibly new. I do think the way you're talking about in terms of our collective trauma, all the different stressors that are put on people right now is probably having an influence somewhat.
For sure.
But
Yeah.
at its base level, if people create inclusive environments where people feel like they want to do a good job, then companies will have success.
Right.
Moving
Alright,
on.
let's move on. What's the next
So I
story?
also have a sports story for you, Nadia.
Oh, love it.
And
Sports.
I found out from you yesterday that you basically get all of your sports news from me, right?
Yes, and it's so funny. I used to like love watching sports and then I think maybe because of what you're probably similar to what you're probably going to share with me of what happened in the news,
uh,
I just got so like disheartened by watching a lot of the sports that's out there right now.
Understood. And what we're talking about is that Phoenix Suns and Mercury owner Robert Sarver will sell the teams after the NBA conducted an investigation that found that Sarver, over an 18-year period, used racist and misogynistic language and frequently engaged in harsh and demeaning treatment of employees. And so,
Mm,
to me, Nadia, this is really interesting. Been following the story for a while, right? So, the law firm that did the investigation for the NBA recommended a 1-year suspension and a $10 million fine. And I
Okay.
think what was interesting was the players, notably LeBron James and Chris Paul of the Phoenix Suns, that said effectively that's not enough. That's not the environment that we think that we want to be a part of. It's not that what the league should stand for. And then also
Mhm.
advertisers like PayPal said they would pull their sponsorship unless Sarver was left and sold the team. So the one thing that that relates to what we're talking about here on a weekly basis that I've seen over and over again. So the law firm and the NBA, they really shaded the penalty that they had allocated more toward the rights of Sarver, in my opinion. They were
Mm.
more concerned
Mhm.
about being sued by the owner who had committed these acts. And, they weren't really fully in tune with the outrage and the blowback that they would get from the fans, from the players, and from their
Staff.
advertisers as well. And so I think that we see this a lot where companies take so much effort to be cautious about being sued for, like, say, reverse discrimination as opposed to making sure that they're on the right side of for their employees that are actually being discriminated against.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just a really interesting example. And another example of power shifting to employees as well, right? So,
Yeah.
it's the players that made this happen. Most sports teams are owned by white males, and so this is where, and the
No.
and the
Really?
and the players are most often not white males, and I think this is a case where
Mhm.
the players said, "Hey, we don't think that this penalty is enough," and they essentially forced the sale of the team.
So, may I share my thoughts?
Sure, yeah,
Really brief thoughts. You know, kudos to the staff, the employees, the players for holding the NBA accountable. For those that don't know, NBA is basketball, Phoenix Suns basketball team. What's interesting to me is and I guess maybe I just don't know enough about it, but I'd love to hear your perspective. Like this person who was going to be fined, this owner, sorry,
hmm
who's the owner, he gets fined $10 million, and then he decides he wants to instead to like kind of maybe run away from the problem. He's going to sell the team,
hmm
where I would imagine he's going to make probably a big profit, right? Isn't the team worth like over $1 billion?
yeah.
So
You'll probably make about $1 billion on it.
okay, so you have this, white male who's now been first of all, I'd love to know, did he like even did he even acknowledge his behaviors from the past? Did he even like apologize for that? Like sincerely apologize for like the misogyny, the what was it, bullying, there was like racist remarks, like all of those things. And then on top of it, he's going to make a profit. Like he's basically going to make money that continues to make him wealthy, and in my mind, it's like, what are the consequences? Like, has he actually learned in changing his behavior? I don't know. It's so interesting to me. I'm really happy though that the players held him accountable, hopefully the staff and everyone kind of involved. And it does sound like the NBA is making means to hold people accountable. I mean, heck, I just heard like the Celtics head coach also is being held accountable for some inappropriate relations that he had with the staff member. But anyway, so those I don't even know if my thoughts are making sense.
It makes
I'm
it,
disappointed in a lot of the professional leagues out there right
yeah,
now.
it makes sense. And one of the things that you had asked me previously was, is this normal for these organizations? And so what I think is, what I would say with regard to that is that this is an owner that's been around since the early 2000s. As these franchises and the ownership groups start to flip, you start to see much more professionalized environments for these
Sure.
sports organizations, and so you're starting to see. So I'm pretty certain that once they sell this club, there will be a much more professional organization in place, and that it'll be a much better environment for all the players and all the employees of that particular team.
Sure. I really hope so. I also didn't know LeBron James played for the Phoenix Suns. I thought he
He
still played for the Lakers. Was I wrong in that?
No, he does play for the Lakers. Chris Paul plays for the Phoenix
Oh.
Suns.
Oh, got it. Okay. Go sports.
Well, thanks for that, Nadia. Okay, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back with Asad Butt.
Welcome back, folks. Our guest today is Asad Butt. Some of you may know him as Asad. Asad is the CEO and founder of Rifelion Media, a media and production company whose mission is to elevate diverse voices. American Muslim Project is the company's first production, where he's also the host for. Asad is also a startup advisor and investor, primarily working with pet care and education founders and accelerator programs. Prior to his work in the startup industry, Asad worked in broadcast television and video production. In 2004, Asad helped launch Bridges TV, the first American Muslim lifestyle network, serving as its first news director, producer, and anchor. Rob, we're going to have to ask him about that. He also teaches in the Media Ventures program at Boston University. He's an avid pickleball player, concert goer, and meme maker. He's also my older brother. Welcome, Asad. Thanks for joining us on Inclusive Collective.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is gonna be fun.
It's yeah. Thanks for joining as part of our friends and family series that we're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love it.
Well,
I
thanks
love it.
so much for being here, Asad. It's great to see you. So I figured we could just start. Just tell us a little bit about Rifelion, what you're doing, what the vision is there, what the gap that you saw based on your previous experience in media was, and and what's the opportunity that you think there is for your new media company.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying Rifelion has kind of been a dream of mine for 20 years, almost since I, graduated from college, and I hadn't been able to kind of put the pieces together to launch it until recently. And the goal of the company has been to basically share the stories that aren't being told in mainstream media. And the research that I've done in the last couple of years, you see, and this is not news to anybody, especially people that listen to this podcast, is that media companies in North America are primarily owned by white men, and the funders are primarily white men. And as a result, through however you want to describe it, like the stories that end up being told, the protagonists that come across in these stories tend to be white male characters. And so people like me, brown, South Asian men, or brown, like my sister, brown South Asian woman, very rarely see them. And so,
And don't forget. Oh wait, never
I
mind.
don't know, Rob.
Rob. We see you, I see you. And so really Rifelion, we're starting with podcasts, and we're starting with the American Muslim community, and then we want to expand into movies and TV shows. And the goal is to do a wide range of content. So we have podcasts that are talking about diversity, equity, inclusion in the business world, and
Ooh,
we have
woo woo.
podcasts about what it was like to live as an American Muslim post 9/11. And we want to go into sports and advice shows and you name it, with a common denominator being that it's hosted and produced by people of color, or people of the, as I've learned on this podcast, people from the new majority, right?
Yeah. Okay, very cool. So can you tell us a little bit more about, in 2004, you said that you worked at the first founded Muslim television company, Bridges TV. Can you tell us a little bit more about like why you went into that and what was your experience there? Because it sounds very similar to what you're hoping to accomplish today. Like what went wrong kind of in that industry back
Yeah,
then?
so in 2004, I helped launch the first American Muslim lifestyle network called Bridges TV, and the goal was to basically be like BET is for the African American community. It was, the goal is to create a network like that for American Muslims, and it was on cable. And you got to remember, 2004. This is pre-YouTube. This is pre-videos on the internet. So the only really way to reach a mass audience like that was through getting on a cable package. And so Bridges TV was launched, and I think it was technically launched in 2005. I can't remember, but we launched on, I think it was the Verizon network in a couple different cities across the country. And the goal was to really showcase news and movies and TV shows and all sorts of content focused on the American Muslim community, and it failed miserably.
Okay.
And part of it was it wasn't able to find that wide audience because the Muslim American community is across the country, right? We're not. There are pockets of Muslim Americans in Detroit and New York and elsewhere, but as a whole, if it was hard to target American Muslims directly
Mm.
through cable, because you had to be on every single cable package.
Sure.
The second was you needed a lot of money to produce really good content,
Mhm.
and we just didn't have it. Things have changed quite a bit in the 15 years since then, with the advent of streaming, podcasting, YouTubing, you name it, you can reach your audience a lot more directly, and you don't have to have expensive productions in order to generate revenue. And so those are the lessons that I learned from Bridges TV. Just like, we don't need to go big right now in order to generate revenue and to create content that our audience needs.
In that venture, were there, I'm thinking about 2004, still the 9/11, September 11th, 2001,
Oh
still
yeah, totally.
very recent in people's minds at that point. And we're conducting a war, multiple wars, right, in Afghanistan and Iraq at that point. Were there biases against that project at that time? And then just tell me, what does it look like? What does the landscape look like now?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it launched in that time period is actually pretty remarkable, and I think it was the previous generation of people like you at these organizations that realized that they needed to diversify their
Mm,
content, that they were offering on their packages, and this was the right way to do it. I think also we were coming off the heels of BET being $1 billion
mm.
business. And so people realized there might be some money in niche. And around the same time, the other type of niche network that launched was Logo, targeting the gay and lesbian community, which ended up taking off and blowing up. It was great compared to Bridges TV. And so I think they were a lot better funded and had better management. And so,
Lifetime Network,
yeah, I think,
right?
Oh, yeah, Lifetime.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. 60-year-old white women, like there was that.
Oh
That's a
my god,
target.
all of my friends love the Lifetime movies.
Yeah, totally, totally. So, I think that, I think the biggest difference, as I kind of alluded to before now, is that, like, you can create content to just put it online. I mean, there still is a big challenge. I think, from say 2005 to 2017, there's still a bunch of challenge of getting network television or cable television to do content specifically for American Muslims. There are pockets of movies and TV shows and other content that came out. What we've seen in the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years is, again, this reemergence. I kind of describe it as like a second wave of Muslim creativity post 9/11, where we're really seeing things like Rami. We saw the show called
Love.
Mo that just came out last week.
So good.
Our network and a bunch of other content specifically targeting American Muslims, because the business model now works. For lack of a better
Sure.
phrase.
It's so interesting too. Like, how do you there's Al Jazeera, there's like Young Turks, which are, I know they're not specifically Muslim geared, but they're news, they're, journalism organizations, media organizations. How do you see yourself kind of being different? I know storytelling is a major component of your media, production company. What are some of the other ways that you're different than the Al Jazeera or the Young Turks?
Yeah. I'm hoping that honestly, our biggest differentiator is,
Rob? I'm just kidding.
it is Rob, is quantity in addition to quality. I think that we were just talking about Lifetime. Talk to me about how many Christmas movies come out every year,
Mm.
60,
Mhm.
70, right? Like, how many Eid movies do you know of? I know of
None.
one
I mean,
short film, right? And so,
okay.
like, even if Rifelion was just to focus on creating 5 Christmas movies over the next decade and continuing that trend, like, there's money to be made in them hills, as they say, right? And so, and then the second part of that is that there is this entire generation of Muslim creatives that are just chomping at the bit to express themselves, right? And so it's really it's almost like venture investing in some way, shape, or form. You throw enough investment money behind some of these projects, one of them is going to blow up and be the next, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, or
Mm.
whatever it may be, right? Serial podcast, and we just haven't had, to go back to another sports analogy, as many swings at the plate as other communities have had.
Mm.
Mm.
Do you understand that reference, Nadia?
I do. Sports. Go sports.
Go sports. Yeah, and I think we've touched upon it a couple of times here, and I think that big fat Greek wedding analogy is good. So I always wonder about. I think about my childhood, many years ago, but there was some ubiquitousness in the media, but that created some shared experiences as well. And so when you think about like BET, because of the rise of hip hop, it started to get traction with white audiences as well.
Yeah.
Yours truly watching Video Soul like after school, right? And Video Soul,
So
and
I love that
my
image.
main man
I
Donnie
would love
Simpson,
to
right?
picture you dancing. Yes, that's
Yeah, but
amazing.
so I just is that what so there's we're super ultra targeted with our media now, and so even the two shows that you reference I've certainly never heard of, and I think that we don't have those shared experiences at all. And so do you look for to draw in a broader audience as well? I mean, what are your thoughts on that fragmentation of media as it relates to
Yeah.
like a healthy environment and shared experiences?
Yeah, no, I 100%. I mean, I think that I think as I look at projects and what we greenlight, I think there's got to be a mix of kind of niche and wider, audiences. I think that, the wider audience might not necessarily mean the greater white or non-Muslim American audience. It could mean
Hmm.
the Egyptian audience or the
Sure.
Pakistani audience or the international audience that is Muslim, right? And I think that's something that I would like for our content to reach as well, because I think it's interesting. Um, you know, Media influences. We see the influence of media across the board. Whether it's positive or negative, right? And so
Hmm.
I think for us to be in the arena to produce content, yes, the goal is to reach a wider audience, to reach people that are adjacent to American Muslims so that they can better understand us and understand our stories.
Well, and there's representation, right? Like
Totally.
I've never really grown up seeing, other than like Bollywood movies, I've never really seen an American Muslim l- play a lead role until like Riz. I feel like maybe prior to Riz Ahmed, but I feel like he's kind of more popular right now. He's not even American. He's British. He's
Yeah.
British Pakistani.
Yeah.
So watching Mo on Netflix just a few weeks ago, I was like, oh my god, like he's Palestinian Muslim, but there's so many references that I can relate to. Um, although I'm not a refugee and I'm not Palestinian, there were just still so many overlaps. And I was like, it's so cool to see this person play this lead role in a really funny show
Yeah.
that that non-Muslims can watch
And
and be entertained by.
totally. And I think, Rob, to your point as well, or your question as well, like so many Americans now are interested because of especially in the last couple of years, the conversations that we're talking about here, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, that kind of stuff. Like they're
Hmm.
interested in the things that are different from them, and so just this past week, as I had texted my sister, in my small little section of Portland, Oregon, there was a 5 p.m. Bollywood dance party, and 99% of the people that showed up were white people of Portland, right? It was, and so there's an interest in this, and they were better dancers than I was. They could dance the bug moves,
Is
and
is that
and
a
so
high
there's
bar though?
yeah.
Like,
I did not. I did not practice like you did after school to be to soul.
Video Soul. Video
Yeah,
Soul.
video soul
Video
was
song,
that
Yeah,
video
yeah.
song.
I could do the '90s head grunge, head bob. That's about it.
Oh my god. So also I have a question for you. You have this experience in ed tech, definitely in the startup space, the accelerator space. How now you're also in experience in the pet care industry. How have all those kind of experiences helped you with starting your own company? What are some of like the things that have benefited from that experience, but also maybe some of the barriers that you've come across as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing about being an accelerator kind of director and investor is that I've seen a lot of other founders and what they've struggled with and what they've done right, and so I've been able to kind of learn the lessons of that, and also their management styles. I'm the first to say, if I was to have started this company when I was 25 or even when I was 30 or 35, my management skills just were not ready at that point to handle frankly, they're probably not even ready right now, but I'm, a lot better educated on, I think, again, talk about the influence of media. I think, in my early 20s and even my first experiences out of college in the workforce, the norm was having bosses that yell at you, right? And that are antagonistic, and
You're
that
scared of.
you work
Yeah.
80 hours a week, and then, all these kind of bad, quote unquote, or bad cultural habits for the workplace. And, I think about the type of manager I was, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, to who I am now. It's night and day. And, there's still a lot that I have to learn, which is why I listen to your podcast. But yeah, and I think other big skill is that, especially being around in the startup space, is that startups are all about grabbing all the resources that you can, building that team, getting projects off the ground. And in the media space, that's everything, right? A new podcast, a new movie, a new TV show is all about building that team, finding that funding, finding that project, greenlighting it, and go. And so I feel like the last 20 years of my career have been basically positioning myself to execute on Rifelion. And so far it's going, okay.
And, and work with your
Right
sister.
now.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is it going right now?
It's only going well because we brought in the white man, Rob, to help us out with everything.
He's my favorite.
His minority partner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I do one on just media bias as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
So Asad, as we speak today, an area the size of Colorado is underwater in Pakistan, and obviously there was the horrific conditions in Puerto Rico post a hurricane. And so my guess is that most Americans don't know that, especially the piece about Pakistan. So I see very little coverage. Like, what is your perspective? Just curious on your thoughts, and am I overreacting to some of the bias in the way that we get our news?
No, I think you're 100% right, and I think this goes back to the first question: is why we're starting Rifelion is that representation, and who owns, quote unquote, owns the media organizations, and who is deciding what is news. I'll give you a perfect example. When I first started my career, I was interning at a radio station in Boston when 9/11 happened, and literally I'm an intern 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, 9/11 happens. And a producer, after they started bombing Afghanistan, a producer runs into the newsroom and goes, "How do you pronounce this city, Peshawar, in Pakistan?" And I turn and like, "You pronounce it Peshawar." And he looks at me, he's like, "Well, how do you know?" And I'm like, "Well, my family's from there." Like that's how I know, right? And like that, to me, that's like the perfect illustration of like representation in these rooms matter, right? And like the fact of the matter is that news organizations right now, they probably don't have a lot of South Asians that are journalists that can tell them or explain to them why it's such a big deal that this flooding is happening and climate change and all this kind of stuff. And same with Puerto Rico. Like, I think there's not enough, quote unquote, diversity that you don't like, diverse people that you don't like to say at the table. And I think part of it is that we have too much media consolidation. Too many of these organizations are controlled by, a couple organizations. And so, and decisions are made because of revenue reasons as opposed to journalistic reasons. I mean, it's a whole host of reasons. And then we can also get into like, what's covered is really what's important to the coastal elites because they're, the ones that are predominantly in these newsrooms. And so then, it's that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, there's a whole host of issues, and I could go on for a long time talking about it. But
Well, Asad, but thank you so much for joining Inclusive Collective. We really appreciate you joining us.
yeah, thanks. This was a lot of fun. I hope, Rob, that you'll kick Nadia off as co-host and make me the permanent one.
It become a sports
Well, let's
podcast.
do it.
right?
Yeah. If you're looking for a sports show, I think we know where to.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll be right back after this.
Welcome back, folks. Rob, it was kind of weird having my brother on
Was
the
it? Was it tough
podcast
for you?
with us,
Was
wasn't
it tough for you?
No, it wasn't tough. No,
Did you
I
know
just,
the answers to
it's
all
so
of the
interest-
questions before you asked them?
I I didn't. That's
Do
like
you feel
what's so
closer to your
interesting.
brother now?
I've always felt. I mean, we've gotten closer over the last 2 years. You know, it's. I'll give you my quick kind of takeaways. I think it's so interesting that we both took very different career paths as we, are now, 20 years into our career. It's we both are doing very similar things. Like I'm researching the lived experiences of American Muslims in the workplace, and he is trying to elevate diverse voices through really trying to bring more representation of American Muslims to the media, to stories, to it's just interesting to me, and yeah, I really appreciated him sharing that with our audience and the world.
Yeah,
What are your
yeah.
what are your takeaways?
That was great stuff. I love talking about media, obviously, and he has such a great background. And so, thank you, thanks both of you for inviting me into your family. I'm happy. I'm part of the. I'm the fourth.
The Bud household.
Maybe we'll get your sister on here next time as well. Maybe we'll
Yeah,
call her in.
sure.
So, Nadia, we have a good closing segment, new closing segment.
Yes.
It is called Raves and Rants. And the way it works
Yes.
is every week we're going to determine by coin flip who's going to do a rave, which is something positive that they see
Okay.
this week or something they're looking forward to, and who's going to rant or complain about something as well.
Okay.
Kicking it off this week, you drew the rave, so I will cede the floor to you.
So, last week, a Congress member from Louisiana, Rep. Clay Higgins, had a contentious exchange with a witness where he shouted at her using phrases like young lady and called her boo. And I really appreciate Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, AOC from New York, where she called him out on that shit. And she was reminded him how super condescending and misogynistic his behavior was, and I just thought it was wonderful that she held him accountable, because you know what? If you see something, you say something. So I'm
Absolutely.
here for leaders calling out other leaders' stupid behavior.
Yeah, politics aside, whatever you think about AOC, it's probably my favorite quality is that in the
Mhm.
moment she calls everyone out on their behavior, and it's a
Yep.
really powerful example of how you're supposed to do it right in the moment and stand up for people and stand up for yourself. So love that as
In a
well.
very classy way.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah. No,
absolutely.
she always gives a master class on stand up for yourself and stand up for others. So I really appreciate that as well.
Sure.
So my rant,
What's your rant?
my rant.
Yeah, what's your rant?
For all of the, I think that there's like this one-to-one correlation between CEOs and companies that built really awesome, expensive office buildings in the run-up to 2020. And then also those CEOs and companies have magically said that it's really important to be in the office in order to sustain their culture, right? And so I've had a couple of anecdotal things this week where people have told me that their companies are trying to get them to go back into the office.
Mhm.
And it just so happens that they have beautiful campuses that people, that they spent a lot of money on pre 2020. And so I just hate that when companies and particularly CEOs hide, for the first time, maybe they've never been too worried about culture before, but now that they've got a vacant office building sitting there, they're really into culture and it's really important to them. So it's
Yeah.
not to say that, the offices aren't important and that environment is important for some companies. Of course it is. But you have to have a really good reason to bring everyone back, to make people commute, which obviously disadvantages people that live farther away, which most often are people that aren't at the top of the organizational chart, right? And so,
Right.
so hiding behind culture, I get really, I'm really annoyed by that this week.
Yeah. That's a great rant. Thank you for ranting on that.
All right, my pleasure, Nadia. It's been a great time. Thank you so much. Inclusive Collective is a production of Rifelion Media. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any feedback for us directly, send us an email at inclusivecollective@rifelion.com. Find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Are we on TikTok?
We're kind of on TikTok.
Kind of
We're
on
going to get more
TikTok.
present on TikTok.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of on TikTok.
Yeah, maybe next week we'll be on TikTok. Thanks again to our guest, Asad Butt. We'll be back next week. Nadia, it's been a pleasure.
Be swell. Be well.